Hello everyone, thanks to the power of the internet I get to talk with you all, and it has been a very long time, about probably half a year since I've done a full guide on Direful dolls, and it actually really warms my heart that I've gotten so many people coming to me with questions and just saying they watched me and got into dolls, which is the entire project, idea. So this is just going to be an update up to DZBT08, which is why this guide exists, for everyone who wants to get into dolls and see the future of where dolls is going, because we just went, at least for the US, we have gotten into set 7, so we just got Moon Man and whatnot, Bav, Tier 0, which I still think dolls is a great answer to, because Bav can't really do anything against dolls in a meaningful manner. However, JP is already in set 8, and I feel like no one is talking about it or doing a lot of deck list about it. So I'm just going to take some time here, fully go over dolls again, and some strategy. So once again, meet the dolls of the Grand Guignol. We have the Ride line, the also classic for Direful dolls. Starting with Tanya, who is the Grade 0. It's only the really choice you have because it is a Direful doll and a Workroid. This comes down to, even though we have such recursion from Soul, Drop, and Bind now, this is your in case of emergencies. This is, you have 2 and still need that dry +1, so you call out Tanya. Or, Soul Blasted out, now you discard another doll, now Pelagia has another target, so you don't feel as bad only putting 1 in with her effect. We have Serenella. God bless this card. I love her so much. She's a 13k attacker or booster, but more importantly, she looks at top 7 when rode upon, get 2 dolls, hopefully, and put them into Soul. It's just a very good card. Sadly, I think she's coming out of main deck, which I'm always sad to see, but she will always be present in the Ride line, meaning she's always a 1-of in the deck, technically. Next, we have Griselda, another card I fear is leaving the main deck, but she has done so much good work in these sets, and I'm so glad you at least still get 1 of her. What does she do? She calls herself for free when you ride over her with Android. When on place on rear, so either from hand or from this effect, if you have Direful doll, which you should, you put a Direful doll from hand into Soul, which sets up Android, and you draw a card. Not only that, you choose your Vanguard, so Android and Griselda both get 5k. Meaning Android is now an 18k attacker on your first turn 3. There are some other things that can boost him up to 23, just to get some more magic numbers going. However, 18 is still an intimidating number. Finally, we have the man himself, Android. CB1, choose up to the same number of Workroid cards with Direful doll from your Soul as the grade of your opponent's Vanguard. So if your opponent's grade 2, you call 2. If it's grade 3, you call 3. If you're fighting against Tree, the old one will still say 0, so you can't call any, but the new one gets grade, so you can call more. When they're on the big tree, call up to 10, I guess. It's funny. However, if you call 3 or more, you get dry +1. This is a very effective and actually intimidating effect. It's less so because every Vanguard seems to be getting dry +1 nowadays. However, this basically says Counterblast 1, you don't have to play from your hand. And then finally, when it is attack, choose up to 1. I wish it was more, but that's me being a little bit greedy. Choose up to a Workroid with Direful from your bind. Call it a rear, and it gets 5k shield. This is simplicity at its finest, but is like the grand scheme of dolls. Is your resource loop of, hey, I have a doll, it binds itself, and I can now guard with it. And so many people get so mad at how defensive this deck is, and it's beautiful. However, we have some more dolls, so let's keep going. I keep talking about this resource loop, so let me further explain. This is your core. These are always your 4-ofs. God forbid you bump Liberata from 4 to 3, possible, but Providenza for multi-attack, Pelagia for resource and big shield, Liberata for proactive responses to your opponent, to set up your main phase, and also one of your beaters. Also, in theory, you can always repeat this loop because Providenza, boosted by Pelagia, can put Liberata from drop into soul. When these two will bind, Liberata will bind itself. You guard with Providenza. You guard with Liberata. Liberata puts that Providenza into soul. But here are their full effects. Here is Direful Doll Pelagia. God bless, she is a common with the strength of a triple rare, because whenever she boosts a Direful, so on rear or van, not grade restricted, you bind her. Choose 2 cards from drop, can be the same unit, can be different units, doesn't matter, throw them in soul. But the thing that makes her the most powerful outside of that is the fact she gets 5k additional shield, meaning she is a 10k throughout your hand, just in general, and a 15k from bind, which really helps because if your opponent's swinging for 23s or lower, it's just Pelagia. Next we have Providenza, once again our multi-attacker. Sadly, her first effect is restricted to your opponent being grade 3, because when it attacks a grade 3 or greater unit. So I guess if you really want to be funny, if your opponent's superior called one, you could attack into that for the power. However, at the end of the attack, you are a grade 3, meaning she works when your opponent's grade 2. Energy Blast 3, bind this unit. You can choose a Workoroid with Direfall from a different card name from your soul and call it. So you can't go Providenza, even though I wish. But you can swing Providenza, bind, which makes Doll a 4 to 5 attack. Sadly, this is Energy 3, so you kind of average around just 4 attacks if you're not playing carefully. Next, we have one of the queens herself, Liberata. Whenever she's placed on rear or guardian, she will put a Direfall from your drop into soul. So from here, if she's just in your hand and you want to call more dolls but you don't have them in soul, you just call Liberata and get it there. But more importantly, when you guard from bind, you will also have the chance to guard with Liberata, being a 5k shield because of Android. And you can choose any Direful doll from your drop and just tuck it into soul, which fuels your next main phase. She's also very great because she's not grade restricted for this power boost. If you're a grade 3, whenever she swings, plus 10k. All you gotta do is at the end of that turn, bind her, so she's always 23. Not quite a magic number, but as we go further on, she can be at 28. And if you're being really greedy, 33. However, she has the added benefits of you can pay a cost of CB1 to draw a card. Now, before this used to be a really heavy cost for dolls, but in the next slide, when we talk about resources, you can see that there's now something that refunds our CB cost, so we can have a little bit more extension to our payments. And here they are. Here is Zarya and Bartoloma. Zarya exists to always give you 1 energy, Bartoloma as a countercharger. I love her so much. So, going more in depth, Zarya, whenever you boost, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you bind her and energy charge 1. Sadly, I don't think Zarya is really important. If you want to run her just to be funny, you can, but you would have to go through 3 Zaryas to fuel exactly 1 Providenza, and that's just not worth it, because that's a lot of effort to get 1 extra attack, where you can just wait 1 turn. So if you don't have your Persona ride, don't call 2 Providenzas and just wait till when you can to really push pressure, which is 3 turns of Zarya for free. However, Bartoloma, this is automatically just a base 2 of and will never change. You can play her as a 4 of or 3 of depending on how much you want to see her and if you have some of the future dolls promos or not. But if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you can bind another normal rearguard unit. Choose one of your units, so this includes the Vanguard. It gets 5k. And if you didn't countercharge, put this on the bottom of the deck and countercharge 1. Meaning, for Liberata, you can just countercharge that draw cost for free. If you're at 1, you don't draw up Liberata, but hey, you can now pay for Android next turn and guard all of your opponent's attacks. As long as you just keep finding another Bartoloma to keep fueling that counterblast, she's beautiful, and she also bot decks herself, so you're not allowed to abuse her as other countercharge or other decks could, but also helps you play for the long game, because you technically can't deck out as long as you just have Twin Drive and you keep decking Bartolomas. Here are our big beaters. There is Shelby, Tarquinia, and Guetta. Just because it's hard to see them on the screen, let's go to the next one. Here is Shelby. What does she do? Well, if you attack a grade 3 or greater, put a card with Direful Doll from your drop into Soul. So theoretically you want Liberata for that plus 15, but most likely you will be throwing in a grade 1 or a grade 2, so it's either a plus 5 or a plus 10. And at the end of the battle, if you use that effect, you bind her. Additionally, Shelby has a cost. Whenever this unit attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, and it hits, you just retire one of your opponent's rear guards. That's not too bad. This card in itself is the biggest beater dolls have if you throw in a grade 3 or greater Direful Doll. She beats out however big Liberata can get by exactly 2k. Next we have Tarquinia. Sadly, this promo is more expensive than I ever dreamed of her being, but she's a really good and almost mandatory doll to have because of how consistent she makes the deck. Because if you have a Direful Doll, meaning if you're a grade 2 or a grade 3, whenever you play her, CB1, look at the top 5, add a normal unit with Direful Doll from among them, add it to your hand. It's as simple as that. You need to find your persona, you need to find multi-attacking, let's find Bartoloma and just pay for that CB1. But guess what? This also counts when you call off Providenza, so you can kind of deck thin to increase the odds of trigger checking on what most likely will be Drive +1. Not only that is you're shuffling the deck, meaning you are more likely to draw into any Bartolomas that you have just bottom decked. And just like Providenza, if she's attacking a grade 3 or greater, if you have, well actually, if you have a grade 3 or greater, so she's like Liberata I should say, she gets 10k until end of the battle, and then you have to bind her. So she's always a 20k attacker if you're a grade 3, meaning you can rush your opponent. That's pretty good. I would just say always run her as a round of 3 of. Now I know many of you just are getting new to dolls and her price is intimidating. Well, depending on when you're watching this video from the release, there was an announcement that she would be reprinted. I don't know when the rest of the world will get this in comparison to JP, because JP doesn't even have a time. It will just happen sometime in 2025. So hopefully soon it will decrease her cost. However, we have more beaters to go over. Here is your budget option, Guetta. Whenever she's placed on rear, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, she gets 5k. If she was placed by a card's ability, and you are grade 3 or greater, she gets 10k. So it's kind of sad that she can't bind herself. It would have been nice if she could, but this basically means she's 15k if you just hard play her from hand, which isn't bad. Or a 20k attacker if you call her off of Providence, or you call her off of Android's skill. Not too bad considering you have Bartoloma, so you can still get her off the field. Finally, we have 3 triggers with the word Direful in them. You can't really search them off Tarquinia, but you can search them off Serenella. Doubt it they'll go into Soul, but that's not always a bad idea. Now, we do have some new dolls that aren't out yet or have been announced. I've done a video at least on one of them I know. Actually all of them, but we're going to go over them here because this is a dedicated video for it. First, we have the side order. I know when I said in my video that I'm not a big fan of this, mainly because it doesn't fit the image of Direful dolls I have in my head. However, hopefully this is a budget option. When this promo releases, if I shit talk it enough, it will lower the price. But however, this helps everyone in the long run. If you are new to dolls, this is a must pick up because it helps you just learn your combos a little bit more and freely helps you. Even if you're just okay at dolls or even need some more consistency, this one just helps you out and feels really good if you're going first. I'll get into it. It's a little weird that it's a set order, but hey, who cares? What does it do? Well, this is basically your Tarquinia. This is your Pelagia combined into one. Whenever you play it, you search your top 7 for a Direful doll that is equal to or less than the grade of your Vanguard. So yes, you can hard rip this off grade 1. There's a lot of good grade 1s you can grab off this. However, if you draw into it or you wait until you're grade 3, you can also search out your Persona rides, which are nice, and you're not paying a cost for this. You also have, if you have a Vanguard with Direful, you just put it into drop, and then you choose 2 different dolls from your drop and put them into Soul. And this is during your main phase. So if you're going like, oh, I need to multi-attack, but I don't have Providenza, Well, here's your answer. If she's in your drop, just add her and one other doll. Sadly, one of the reasons I don't like this is because you can't just choose 2 of the same doll, and most of the time, that's what you need. But by no means is this a bad card, and if you're just getting into dolls, I highly recommend looking into it. Next, we have Artia. Now, for being a rare, most people are going to look her over, but I feel this is one of the dolls that raises the bar for everyone. Mainly because it's a better Serenella main deck. Why do I say this? Well, if you boost and have a Direfall doll Vanguard grade 3 or greater, you choose a card from your drop with Direfall doll, and you add it to Soul when it's boosting, and if you did this, she gets 5k power. Now, I know Serenella works in the front row too, being a 13k, but now that we have a lot more actual beaters and dedicated grade 2, grade 3s for dolls, you want more boosters where she fits in really well, and you're not always going to see Pelagia. And you also need to hit more magic numbers without Persona Ride, which is why a 13k booster is really impactful. So there's that. Serenella was a 13k booster and why I played multiple of her in the main deck. However, this one incorporates just a smidgen of what Pelagia can do, which opens up a lot of door for investigation, because now, if you're boosting Providenza, that's a 33k column, and you already have your call target off Providenza, because you're getting it off Artia. We also have Consolata. I don't know how many words can express how grateful I am for this. I hate how many restrictions her effect has for being a double rare in dolls. However, by no means should I ever shit-talk this card. When it's placed on Rigard from hand, which doesn't play really well from the doll loop, but seeing it in hand, you look at top 5, 1 Direfall added to Soul. So this enables a grade 1 or a grade 2 rush and benefits you because you're once again setting up Andrild's skill. Because some of the time, it doesn't happen often, but it happens enough, where Serenella will either whiff or you only get 1 doll. And that feels terrible because Griselda is going to call herself out, meaning you have the grade 0, Serenella in Soul, and whatever you threw in off of Serenella's top 7, and that's the one of. If you didn't find any, you only have the 2 going for you right now. And whatever you threw in with Griselda's effect, if you have any in hand. If you don't, you're really suffering. So what she offers is insurmountable to consistency. Now you think that would be it, but no, let me go further. When another rear guard is bound during your turn, which you have quite a lot, most dolls, if not all, bind themselves in some way or another, you additionally bind her and choose 2 units. Once again, it says unit, so your Vanguard is a valid option. You can't choose it for both, but you can choose it for 1, and they both get 5k. Meaning, you can have 2 new attackers off of Providenza, getting plus 5k each. Your Vanguard could also be off of a Persona Ride, now 28 with Drive plus 1. Hey, this is pretty cool and helps dolls hit more consistently magic numbers. Now, I know there are more Direful dolls out there, but the ones I just shown you are the ones you should be paying attention to, because like Patience is tied to Lyle, Arnetta is tied to Harry, Donetta just got the word Direful doll, but doesn't do anything for the deck, at least in Andril Taff, but I love her design. There are other ones that are more generic, but don't fit into it. Now, if you're wanting to build dolls, it's still actually a fairly decent deck to pick up, getting a playset of. Like Tanya, 5 cents, Serenella, 13, Griselda, 18, Andrild's 85 when I check this, and everything minus Tarquinia, who was the outlier, is fairly cheap. So if you're buying a playset of Tarquinia, it's going to cost you around 88 without shipping. That's intimidating. However, if you don't get any Tarquinia, which is fine, you can just probably add in Shelby and get some similar results. It's only around $29, which compared to most modern decks, this is hella cheap for a really good and competitive deck. So you might want to splash in some non-engine into this deck. So what are some of your options? Well, we have Amesis, who is a main phase countercharger, which is never bad in dolls, because if you have all blasted out your energy, you can still technically countercharge with Bartoloma, but it will catch your opponent more off guard if you just slap down this cat and get countercharged to use your effect anyway. But also, it's just a 20k shield that you can use. Get rid of an Android you Persona Road off of in a grade 0, and you're sitting pretty well. Next, and the reason why I showed the fact that Direfulls have triggers, we have Sparta. You can ignore the effect from Almagestar and just read if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, bind a trigger from your soul. She gets 10k. So not only is this fixing the fact that we want bigger numbers, being an 18k booster, she also now just filled your defense with a trigger. Because don't forget, those are 15k guard, fought, and get an additional 5k off Android, making you 33. That's not a bad number. And we also have Clean Sweep Dragon. Now I know his effect is a little intimidating from a doll perspective because you need to find your Persona Ride, which doesn't happen a lot, and also count for another counter blast in your deck. So even though we have Bartoloma, we don't have a lot of free roam when it comes to it. However, it's really funny that you can choose a total of 3 rear guards, so if you have any dolls on the field that you need to throw back in soul and just recall, but more importantly, it puts 3 rear guards from your opponent's field into the soul, and then this gets plus 15k. That's pretty good because this will then be a 35k attacker, and some decks actually can't really recur from their soul, meaning Clean Sweep is a pretty good option.
Oh, I forgot. You're broken.
Because we have Bartoloma, I'm never going to touch this fucking card again. I had it for a BCS before her existence and cried about it. The things I would do for Countercharge 1. You might say, oh, it has more effects. No, that revolves around Bruce being in Final Rush. Alright, so you also want to try a cycle. Well, Lemia is really good because, once again, bot deck and you draw a card. That's really good. You don't want Tizcar. I know a lot of the decks in JP ran it in the beginning. I hate this decision, and I still stand by this, because during the discard, it's either a counterblast, something dolls barely get to hold on to, especially in the prior days without Bartoloma. Even now, it's a very intimidating thought for me. And then there's also Energy Blast 3. Well, I want to do a lot of attacks with Providenza. And if I Energy Blast 3, I'm only a 4-attack deck, putting a lot less pressure on my opponent and a lot less dolls into bind, which cause less defensive. And then we also now have the new Pride Cyclers, whatever you want to call them, Ravos, who is basically the same cost as Lemia, but you get this pretty cool Persona ticket, which is a Blitz order that basically allows you to play another Blitz order so you don't shut yourself off from Elementary, but more importantly is a free shield you can either discard for PG, or, pretty cool, another free 10k shield you're not dedicating from hand. And with the ability of dolls to guard from bind, you're basically never losing real hand advantage. I guess he also, if you're attacking grade 3 or greater, gets plus 5k, being a 15k attacker. That hits numbers. And also, how could I ever forget of Regalia? First we have Radiance Caliburn. I love this because you either draw 2 cards to help your hand advantage, because sometimes you just break off of everything in the world, but more importantly, it's also just another source of a main phase countercharger. You can also choose to be more defensive with Windcast, because you can just discard it for Ride, and still basically having a free 15k shield, or you can guard with it throughout your turns, having it be a 25k shield total. Oh, but wait, we have a better Twincast to announce. If your Vanguard is less than your opponent's, so if you are going second, it can be played ignoring the cost, meaning you can play it when you're grade 1. Choose a unit being attacked and it gets plus 15k. We love that, meaning you're really disincentivizing rushing you early. You also get to choose one of your opponent's unit and it gets minus 5k power. If they Persona Road, minus 10 instead. Now a lot of people are going to look at this and go, huh, isn't this just worse Twincast? Well, I think it's a little bit better, because you're getting a little bit more guard value earlier on when you guard with it. And if your opponent Persona Road, you're basically taking that power away from a unit. And that really helps take away magic numbers from your opponent to make guarding from bind a lot easier. But at the end of the day, they both equivalent to a 25k shield on varying circumstances. So it's really up to you which one you want to do. This one isn't as friendly to discard for Ride. Alright, continuing. What OT should you run? Dark States. There's no other option. You could technically get multi-attack off the red OT because you don't have to give yourself 10k for a doll and have it bound. However, this adds 10k to your Vanguard and a crit, meaning what they would normally just take and hope that you just whiff your dry +1, now you're plus 10k and crit. So even if you don't Persona Ride, you still have a pretty intimidating number, but also you're always now critical, so your opponent has to actually do something about you. But let's look at some deck list. This is currently my deck list. As you can see, I'm still running Serenella for magic numbers. I'm running Caliburn for, like I said, main phase countercharge. Just for my personal playstyle, I enjoy doing Forefront because my opponent never suspects it. I have one of the Stride heals. Technically, if Great Fours ever come back or Strides become more prevalent, I'll go for a 2-2 split. I've added the Pride Cycler because I enjoy free shield, though I will admit I sometimes miss the extra draw off of the Griselda who used to be there. Outside of that, I'm doing 3 Tarkenia, 3 Bartoloma, because I don't want to cut down on, Liberata, Providenza, or Pelagia. And there's not a lot of wiggle room because I still want my cat for the additional shield or, my unexpected main phase countercharge. And I'm running 2 Sparta. Technically, this could be 3, because if you bind a trigger, you're still getting a lot of good benefits. However, you can be a more aggressive build. Like I said, this replaces the Pride Cyclers with Shelby, who, as I said previously, is the biggest beater, and you don't have to rely on Liberata a lot more to put something from drop to soul. You don't have to worry that much about more Pelagia again, and you get a lot more consistency. I bumped my front down to a crit, and basically it's the same deck list, just a whole lot of dolls doing a whole lot of damage, and Sparters for days, so you get an 18k booster, and you just get more shield value. And next up, we have the consistency build. As you can see, we took away the 3 Shelby, or the 3 Pride Cyclers from my list, and put back Griselda, because not only does she draw you when on plays technically, she also helps facilitate your soul. We added up Bartoloma and Tarkenia, up to 4 copies each. And as you can see, we added in draws for that future just draw more, get more dolls, all day, every day, but at the cost of the cats and of Sparta. You can also see that we included Twin Cast. Why? Because you will most likely be rushed, and this helps you consistently just make it to your grade 3 turn, technically your grade 4 turn, which you have to get to for the full, control of the game. Now, this is going to be my deck list going into BT08 when everything is released. You can see Tarkenia, Bartoloma are still at 3. I have the Pride Cycler at 3 still. All 4 of my doll loops are included. But now we have 3 Constanella, who is the Hammer Girl, and 2 Ardia, because it's just another Shelby. As you note, I have removed the cat and Sparta entirely, and I even took out Caliburn for the really cool Blitz order that I stated before. I haven't exactly done a lot of testing of it, but I really look forward to playtesting it. I'm also hopefully going to frame rare out everything else here, because I think that would just be neat. We do have a more beginner-friendly version where I've added in 3 of the set order, because once again it adds consistency. We have, once again, draws for more consistency. Tarkenia, mainly because it's just a really good card, though again it can just probably end up being a Shelby, because you have the set order taking the place of Tarkenia. But like I said, I'm trying to be the most beginner-friendly. You don't have to care what you bind or guard with. You basically are always going to see a doll. And from there, what everyone most likely came for, how to actually play the deck. For turn order, should you go first or second? My personal opinion still is it doesn't really matter. You're a tempo control deck, so the flow of the game should always be dictated by what you do, because you're technically controlling how your opponent plays and how they play against you. However, unlike before, I will say there is a lot of advantage going first, because not only can you rush a little bit more when you're grade 3, you also get to grade 3 before your opponent, so you can set up your bind and damage controlling early. But you also get an extra draw to going second, but it's not as big as an advantage of if you're going first. So just some general tips and mulligans. More dolls the better, because of Griselda, and just generally for discard, you can always just shuffle them back into your soul at a later date. You gotta send things like Persona Rides, because now we have a lot more things that can search out Android, like Tarkania and the Set Order, so not too bad. Also throw back Sparta's, because she only really works when your opponent is grade 3, meaning if you're going first, she's only going to be an 8k booster that can be targeted by your opponent, and you gotta wait till it's their grade 3, meaning your turn 4, before she has any effect. Even when you're going second and she's immediately useful going turn 3, you somehow have to get a crit trigger or any of the Direful Doll triggers from drop, from your hand into soul, which means you kind of lost out on some guard value for power in this immediate turn. Most players will tend to rush you, but now we have Tarkania to punish them because, hey, I now have a counterblast and I'm going to grade 2. Hey, I now get a free Direful Doll from hand. Once again, you basically have so many cyclers outside of the Pride ones. Any Direful Doll can always just be discarded and just thrown back into Soul, like I said. That's what you want to do anyway. You're just accelerating your game plan, and you don't have to see Liberata until it comes out of Soul or you place it, so those are just free discard. Providence is a bit more iffy. You want to do a lot of multi-attack with her. That one's a give and take, but Liberata is definitely a free discard. Also, I recommend trying to keep a trigger in your early game, just because, like I said, you will most likely be rushed, and that's to help mitigate the fact you will be taking a lot of damage. There's only so much you can do when they're fully rushing you, like with a Keter package, where it's like, hey, you need a 20k shield to do anything. At that point, you just gotta hope for a defensive. Just more praise for Tarkania. And it can and will get worse when you mulligan, from my experience. So if it looks playable, just throw back like one heal trigger, call it a day. But if you get greedy looking for more of your dolls, you're just going to end up drawing a lot of triggers, or you're going to just break on so many grade 3s, you'll want to cry. Now, you got to quickly decide or evaluate the plan that your opponent will approach you with. They are either going to, like I said, early game rush you. This is what a lot of people do, and why I'm talking about it majorly. When you're grade 1, grade 2, you gotta suffer to make it to your grade 3 turn, to inconvenience you, because if you're already at 4 or 5 damage, you have to guard everything compared to what you want to be in, like, I'm gonna guard with this, I don't need the damage, but in the hindsight, you check one more trigger than I'm expecting, I can take the damage. So like I've been saying, Tarkania for the early game rush, or punish for that. You might have to use Pelagia as a 10k shield very early on, just to help stabilize, because if they're swinging like 15s, you don't quite want to use a 15k guard, so just have Pelagia there. And like I said, try to have a 15k, because if your opponent swings with their Vanguard unboosted, that's an OT to pass. The more complex and probably the correct approach to dolls is your opponent damages deny you. Because if you can't call out of Soul, your whole game plan falls apart and forces you to call from hand, which you don't want to do because you want that for more guard, or when this happens. This is kind of more mitigated by the fact we now have Bartoloma, so we can objectively always keep one counterblast open for him. But that's not always going to be the case, and if you get too greedy off of a Liberata draw, which I'm very much accountable for, that can happen. But let's go into more plays that can happen with dolls. Well, this is going off the set order being played first when you're grade 1. You play it, look at top 7, if you find Constanella, you'll play her, and then look at an additional top 5 and add one to Soul. So, if you're going first, you've already deck thin 2, which, hey, that's really good. You're already facilitating your grade 3 game, and triggers are more likely to hit. Deck thinning is winning. We also have just a very generic what happens when you're going first, or even second field. You'll call Griselda out of the ride line, you'll counterblast 1. You'll call Serenella, Pelagia, and a Providenza from Soul most likely. Depending on what's in your drop, boost Providenza with Pelagia to just throw the targets in. If your opponent's grade 2, I suggest just swing Providenza. That's still requiring them to guard or take a damage, because it's 10k to 10k. And then, when you call something out, like a Liberata, if you didn't choose to boost with Pelagia, that's now a 31k. In the case of if Serenella, that's a 34k, 36k, that they're most likely going to take on their first turn. And with the ride line, that's just trying to swing for 28, which is even still inconsistent if your opponent is a grade 3. That means they have to do more than a 15k trigger. Now, a later game state might look like this. You've Persona Road, you're going to swing with your Providenza, and you have Sparta on the field that you have bound. You can either have, depending on what's in your soul, if you don't need the boost of it, and you already have everything you need, just swing with Providenza with a Serenella. That's 33k, which gets rid of a lot of inconsistencies with guard, because now that's even a 20k shield and something. So like I said very early on, Bov has to Soul Blast one, and then they get 33k from their shield. Well, you're already hitting 33k. They have to do something more to make that Soul Blast worth it. Or if your opponent's not playing fronts, that's now, here's an intercept, here's a 5k, here's a trigger, or here's 2 triggers. That's the best case scenario for you. Continuing, you really just gotta keep in mind your bind. That Liberata is a 5k, I chose Providenza there, but any grade 2 doll is going to be a 10k shield. Pelagian specifically, the effect one, is going to be a 15k shield because of effects and +5. All the triggers, normally, will be 20k because they're 15, +5. And hey, if you're against a Stride deck, Charmine will get another 10k, being a 25k shield. That's pretty good. Now, assuming your Vanguard, opponent's Vanguard is 13k base, unboosted, Liberata, and any grade 2 doll will make it a 1 to pass. Pelagia, or Charmine, and any of the 20k triggers will make it a 2 to pass. The 20k is an exact 2 to pass. Now, the 25k is a little on and off of what pass it is, because if its skill is being activated, your opponent's grade 4. So if they strode on you, this becomes a 1 to pass, just alone. However, if your opponent's playing a main deck grade 4 as Elder, as Seraph Snow, it then becomes a 3 to pass, which makes it a very valuable trigger to own. And a lot of questions I got is, who can I technically bind off Bartoloma? So I chose the greatest 2 choices, because normally, like, Griselda's an easy one, and most of the other ones are very easy. But what's the difference between Providenza and why you can't choose her, but you can use Liberata? Well, it's all about the cost. Providenza has to be present on your field to pay the cost of Energy Blast 3 and bind her. If you bind her with Bartoloma, Providenza is technically a different card and can no longer resolve her effect, because she, at the end of battle, did not attack. She was just a card in the bind zone, so you cannot do that. However, Liberata is a little bit different. She has to be bound regardless, so the effect is waiting to activate, meaning you, with Bartoloma, can bind Liberata and bot deck her. Now, Liberata's effect still has to be resolved because there is a cost waiting to be paid depending on how you resolve this. Because if you choose to activate Liberata first, well, she's going to bind herself, and then the cost optionally triggers for you, and then you can CB and draw. But now Bartoloma, if you boosted, you have to choose a new normal unit. However, if you choose Bartoloma first, like I said, you bind the Liberata, and then, because she still has a cost that has to be optionally paid, you can then get the chance to counterblast one draw, or you can just keep the open counterblast that you have. Now, at this point, I recommend getting a few games with dolls under your belt before continuing. But if not, cut right back to here, and let's continue. Because these are some more advanced techniques. So here's a new updated field. Note how it's not too Providenza, because you're Tarquinia and Bartoloma, who was once again a new target. So in this instance, you're going to attack with Providenza. You can optionally boost with Pelagia, up to you, depending on if your opponent is defensive or not. Even if this is the first swing, I suggest doing it because it will require them to do more than a trigger. This will then call out Liberata. You then swing with Andral, do your Dry +1. You swing Tarquinia and Bartoloma, binding Tarquinia to give Liberata plus 5k, meaning she now swings 28 without any additional trigger off the check of your Vanguard, which once again is that magic number that we hit so consistently now. 28. That's a 15k shield and something. Or you still just cry during a front. There's only so much I can do. But here is one of my newest favorite, absolute favorite diabolical thing. So obviously you gotta call some dolls from hand. I'm going to say it's Hammer Girl and Pelagia, or what you call from hand. Mainly because I want to activate Hammer Girl's effect. Or actually, you know what? She's off of Andral's effect, and Arda is the one you call from hand. Now, just assume you called 3. You called Hammer and 2 Providenza, and your soul's now empty. That's bad because Providenza no longer has to do it in the way you placed your board. Normally, you would now have to just swing with your Vanguard to put things with Pelagia. No, like I said earlier. You now have Artia, your opponent's grade 3. So this column is going to swing first with Artia. Because you have Direful Dolls in drop, you're going to add 1 Liberata from drop in there. Hey, this is now a 33 column, and you just supplied a Providenza with your next target. This whole column is going to bind itself. You're not going to activate Hammer Girl. You're then going to call Liberata. Liberata then throws in another Liberata from drop. Well, you then just provided the next Providenza swing. So you're going to do that. Note, this is a 28k swing. I know not as intimidating as the first swing, but you didn't have soul and didn't have any options. You're then going to bind Providenza first. This is very important. And then call Liberata. Liberata can go off, or you can activate Hammer Girl first. What does she do? Well, a doll just bound itself, meaning her effect's waiting to activate. Well, then you bind her, and your field is now Android, unswung, unboosted, and 2 Liberata. You have options. Hammer Girl can go like, alright, both Liberata can now swing at 28k columns. Hey, that's pretty good. Or one of them can swing 28, the other one 23. And Android, or even if you want to just be a little funny, Pelagia can get plus 5. Meaning this 21k column is now 26. That's more inconvenient to guard and throws off your opponent's checks for guarding, because what was just 21 got 5k more inconvenient, meaning they're just 15k to stop for a 2 to pass is now only a 1 to pass. Like I said, this is my new favorite board state. We also now just have a more defensive build, where once again, I just copied and pasted the last one, but made it a little different. This time, Android is unboosted. However, this is suck your drop back into soul, because Providence is going to swing, boosted by Artia, 33, or you can even do the other side first, it doesn't matter. The overall objective is, those are going to go in, Pelagia is going to activate, and Providence is actually going to call the grade 1 Pelagia behind your Vanguard. Yes, you're losing out on an attack, and in my case, another 10k on a rearguard if I hit a front, but these are just sacrifices we're willing to take, because this is going to increase your binds financially, substantially, with 2 Pelagias, which is 30k during the turns, but also your drop just got annihilated because Pelagia throws in 2, the other Pelagia you're calling throws in 2, Artia throws in 1. If you're replacing another Liberata with an attack, that's now 6 in drop into your soul. And what is this? 10k, 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 30 combined with the Pelagias? That's a 45k shield that you just committed, 50 because if you're bringing a Liberata. These are a lot of the things that you have to evaluate quickly on your opponent's turn, or else they will and can go like, oh, they're going to go into times. And once again, I'm just going to say, when playing, guard when you don't have to. The whole purpose of dolls and why the set order is really good for newer players, or even you, is it takes away what you have to guard with. Because normally it's like, hey, I need to multi-attack, but Providenza isn't in drop to be added to soul. So I gotta do her first, and then I somehow have to use my hand to guard for this Liberata to fully guard because that puts in my Providenza. Well, sometimes it's like, you're swinging 28. Throw in the Providenza, I'll just take the damage. If I hit a defensive, well, my achievement is already there. Or, just my favorite maneuver, hey, Liberata, I'm now 18k. Hey, discard 1 for PG. Oopsies, thank you for letting me get a doll from my drop into my soul for free. The only things really that you can stay in bind are your triggers, because you don't always need a 20k shield to make you 33. Sometimes you want to save those for when your opponent Persona rides, and you just need the little extra boost. And now, before, I showed you just very simple guards. I showed you pictures and what they are. This is where we get a little bit more intense, because you are a 13k base Vanguard. Depending on what you use from your bind, these are the numbers you're going to encounter. I can't always say what your opponent's Vanguard is going to be at. I can't always say, hey, do Liberata, use a front, that's a no pass. This is a game of chance at the end of the day and what your opponent's been checking against you, so this is what I have. The Persona ticket can be replaced by a draw trigger because they're both 10k alone. You can see we easily get really big numbers. You just need to kind of self-eternalize or do really quick math when your opponent is stacking. I just visualize what's going on. Like, I know Liberata is probably never going to have me do, alright, here's Liberata, here's a 30k shield, here's a ticket, or here's Liberata and 2 fronts. I'm most likely going to go, here's Liberata, discard 1 PG. But sometimes you don't have that, and you just got to remember what your numbers are. This is one of the ways you can cut down your thinking the most. Because most rear guards, you're just going to either take the attack, or like I said, guard just to put it into drop and take it. But most of the time, you just need to look at the top 3 rows, because it's like, hey, they're not always going to have Persona, they're not always going to swing massively. Here's my 10k, here's a trigger, here's 38, no pass on a rear. Now, if you're really getting dedicated, what do dolls need to better themselves? I have this mean because they can either go into the offensive route or a defensive route. I'm fine with either. I would preferably like both. So here's the offensive approach. Giving us something like Abigail, not the exact wording, but something to loop Personas. The countercharge isn't needed, but it would be nice. Whereas you just retire it, choose a grade 3 from your soul, add it to hand. This could even be Liberata, just to go, here's consistency. Here's me Persona riding again, because without Persona rides, Doll's offensive really takes a hit. What is 28 compared to 38? That's a big difference in the world of Cardfight. There's also the defensive approach. Searchable PGs. If we look at here, Stealth has 3 different options they can choose from. Brant has 1. Stokea and Keter can loop theirs in some packages. This would be a cool and a definitely good tie-in for Dark States to finally get one, because I don't think, I've done a lot of looking, you can do that. And I can already hear the complaining from anyone who's not dolls or thinking about dolls and going like, that's too strong. Shut up. You can't loop it like you think, like Sojo Doji. So I've just used a stealth unit to choose to demonstrate this. Because there's only one way we can get that PG to bind. It's with Bartoloma, specifically. And yeah, you could run her as a 4 of, but then you're cutting down on other things you want to see. And yeah. Bartoloma's really good, but it's only a 2 with 3 of. How does this loop not really help? Well, you're giving up so much offense, or even defense, for the PG that you specifically need Bartoloma to get in bind. You would rather a Pelagia for the shield value, and dolls from drop in soul. You can play it from hand. Okay, cool. I'd rather have just used the PG. Just because we're tanky, I have never once seen anyone complain about, well, kind of, Luard or Reziel having an easier time to accomplish these loops and are more stall-focused than we are. Sojo Doji basically did it for free. We would have to bend over backwards. Night Rose just goes, I retire something and call a PG. Sweet shot package. Alright. Enough of me complaining, it's not going to do any good. So what does Android look like versus the world? Well, here are some matchups. Here are the worst ones at all, and I've given them fun little name. Here are timer editions. Because as much as I say dolls don't go into time, well, there are a few that will bring me kicking and screaming. Levia Dress King gives everything -10 and draws a card off of it. Well, if we're not Persona riding, no matter how hard we try, that's making our attacks 23, 10, and just so easy to guard that we have no offense. We're just swinging for the sake of letting Levia Dress draw, where our win condition now becomes deck 'em out. But Levia Dress is also going to swing big at us. Well, we can guard them almost indefinitely with our shield value, but the loss of our offense doesn't quite help. As I said before in the PG section, Rezi, who's using the bind package for PGs, this is just gruesome, because they can Lyle everything back to bot deck. We can bot deck Bartoloma, and even if we don't have Bartoloma, it just becomes a giant fisticuffs of who dies first. You got a PG? I guess you're looping your over trigger, just hit it on me. Eventually it will happen. I can extend this matchup specifically over 45 minutes. And then of course there's the doll mirror. Normally I can do this in a timely manner, but high competitive doll players, you're just gonna keep going. It don't stop. It's just an eternal loop. This is like the standard equivalent of one damage Luard, or even Fenrir. It can be that bad. Here are just some inconvenient matchups. With Sojo Doji, because he can interact with a bind, bot deck it, and put things to drop. While you really don't care about that, it's just become a giant chess battle of you're playing your bind, they're playing your bind. Eventually someone's going to be unhappy, or like me, you're just going to brick, and they're going to get rid of your shield value, and there's nothing you can humanly do about it. Odium isn't that bad. I find it funny, it gets triple drive and warp drive +1. However, that additional turn, if your bind is set up for it, you don't give a shit. If they get to it before then, you're in a little bit of trouble. But you can kind of very easily guard a Lyle Odium player, even if their regress gauge is filled with Distorted Bane. Blagmire, I'm kind of in the same thing, because now you can search personas, but if you don't have it, it becomes really, really bad, because you don't have anything you can really humanly do, and then you only get one check. But you do have the world's funniest interaction, where if they declare Divine Skill, you still get an activation of your guard, but that's the last one you get. And the more thing, it's just Blagmire getting that crit, and Zamu getting a crit. You just gotta guard that somehow. So you gotta really keep yourself at low damage. These are more just inconveniences, but this is because their base power becomes 18. Like I said, dolls suffer from a inherent lack of a lot of power behind them. Even though we can hit inconsistently numbers of like 28 really good and 33 on the occasion, without our personas, we're really not doing much. And Lucifer and, what is MLB going, we're 18k bases now, deal with it. You just kind of have a tear in your eye. These are things that can rush you entirely way too early, and you don't have any room to breathe, and your hand's going to suffer from it in the long game. Bat should be obvious. If things go according to plan, you don't even get to do your eternal living, because they killed you on grade 2. Eve is kind of the same deal, except sometimes their Obscudides are just going to be a little bit too big for your comfort. Many people look at Virgilla and laugh, but from a doll perspective, these get to like 35k on their grade 2 turn, and get a crit. Meaning you can't really guard them, and if they hit another crit, you just took 3 damage before you even decide. If you're on grade 1, heaven God forbid, you're on 3 damage going to grade 2, they get a grade 3 turn, while you're on grade 2, you're most likely going to perish. And hey, guess what? They can just stay on grade 2 and make your life miserable. And then we have Weirabel, who isn't really early game rush. This is just way better Varga, because it gets way too big for dolls to guard itself. And depending on their versions, you just kind of have to sit there and eat all their attacks, or get rid of your whole entire bind, without any care for setup. It's just, please let me live, please let me live, please let me live. Now, what are some of your other matchups? Well, here are kind of just free wins. Varga, it's because their divine skill is tied to whatever the hell you decide they get their divine skill. If they go into Rakasha, yeah, that's fine, I guess, but you get to just taunt them going, I can sit at 3 damage, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. And when I do decide to have 4 damage, I can most likely live your divine skill. I hate doing this. I hate putting this here. I had to throw in Elder. Elder swings for what dolls want the most. 18k. That's any goddamn doll you want back in the rotation. Elder just sits there and just gets pummeled. And then there's Shiranui for kind of like I said before. You got a lot of good shield value and it enables your heal triggers to have even more guard power. There's really nothing they can actually dominate outside of triggers because of how quickly you're going through your bind into soul into bind where they can't touch it. And going into set 8 where you get more, they basically only get cyclers if you leave them there. And then even then that becomes 19k, which is a 10k guard, which is what you want to put Providenza away. And at this point, I have talked probably way too long, and my throat is way too parched because I'm doing this more or less in one take. So this is where we're going to call it. There was a lot more to talk about. There's a lot more, like, I wanted to add, at least combo-wise, but had to hold myself off, and I really hope everyone learned something. If you have any more questions, please let me know. I love talking about dolls, and this is a deck I would love to see more people play and enjoy. Which is why, if you noticed, I'm a little bit biased to it. This is, like, genuinely my favorite standard deck. And I just want to spread that joy and knowledge to others. I'll most likely have more fight videos with it, just showing off my play style, but this is really something you can make your own. And if you made it past all this mad rambling, thank you so much, and have a good one.